Welcome to my podcast, Simon. Thanks for jumping on with us today.
Thanks for having me, mate. Always excited to get in front of a camera.
I've actually always wanted to get a buyer's agent on the podcast for a while, and your name was always on that top of that list. So I was glad I was finally able to organise myself to just send that email. Sometimes you get so busy, you sort of forget it's just an email invite, and you were willing to do it. So I really appreciate you being here.
All good, mate. All good.
Now, tell us a bit about Inspired Property Group. So that's your buyer's agency. I know that I've worked with you for a few years now already, so yeah. I sort of know the evolution of the business. But give us a bit of a recap of you and your experience, where you came from, and of course the business.
Yeah, cool. So let me go. Okay, really going back a little bit. 20 years in Australia. When I first came out here, I got a job as one. They call them charity muggers now. You know, the guys that stand on the street corners and get you to sign up.
Been there, done that.
Right. So I did that for like 4 years, ran a team of 40. Then I went to working directly into charities, doing big corporate partnerships with charities.
Any particulars?
Yeah, I did National Breast Cancer Foundation,
Awesome.
MS Australia, Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children, whole different range of them. Really, really love that. In the process of doing that, though, I came to the point where I wanted to buy my own home and got connected up to a few people. Turned out I couldn't afford to buy my own home because in the area I wanted, I didn't have enough borrowing capacity, which is
that's a common story.
Common story right now. So I was like, well, I still want to get into the market. So I bought my very first investment probably like 10 years ago or something like that, 11 years ago. So I bought that. And then the company that I bought it from, I kind of kept in contact with them because I always loved property. And about 2 years later, they grew and they were like, do you want to come and work for us? So I took, at the time, it was like $100,000 pay cut because it was going from a really good income wage to paying commission as well. So I worked for them for about 2 years, I think, something like that. And then I was like, I can had a few disagreements with the owners, and I was like, no, I can do this better. So then I started my own business, Inspired Property. At the time, it was called Inspired Property Investing because we were just doing investments. And now we've kind of transitioned to Inspired Property Group. But yeah, been doing that now for just over 6 years now.
So what does the group do? You said you started as just as investments, and now you Inspired Property Group. So
yes,
what's the different lines of the group?
Yeah, so originally when I started the business, we just did investment and we just did brand new. That was all we did. And as we've transitioned the business and grown the business, we've now got kind of different aspects. So yes, we still do brand new, but obviously in this market it's a lot tougher.
It's like off the plan construction.
Yeah, so generally house and land, don't do units. So we still do a little bit of that, but not as much as we used to. And then, about 4 years ago, obviously the market went gangbusters with owner-occupiers. So then we started doing a lot of owner-occupier house and land build. We probably flipped from like 100% investment to like 95% owner-occupiers. So we were doing a lot of house. Okay. Yeah, right. Massive flick over.
Because I've always thought you're like the investment guy. You do property investments, but there's I guess when when the market shifts, you sort of shift.
Yeah, you have to pivot. Like I actually did a presentation at a big finance brokers day exactly about being able to pivot your business, because if you don't pivot, and especially because a lot of my referrals come through from brokers, accountants, financial planners. So their businesses, as you would know, being shift, right? Sometimes you're massively into the investment stuff, and then it's all into the refinance, and then it's all into the owner-occupier. So we shifted 100%. Into that. So we started doing those. And then as the market progressed, interest rates went up, borrowing capacities came down, new build prices increased, and we started seeing this difference in the market. I was like, hang on a minute, you can buy like a 2 or 3 year old property for like 150 grand less than you can build for. So then we transitioned in going for existing property, and that was probably about probably about 1.5 to 2 years ago.
Okay.
So now basically our offering is we do brand new. So I'm actually starting to do a few more house and land builds now for owner occupier clients. So we do brand new. We do and we also do existing properties as well now. And then the other little feather in our cap we partnered with a property management company. So now we can do property management around Australia as well. So we help, so we help do that as well. And then we've always done the other little thing on the side is we've always done, and they call them small developments, and I don't really like that they call them small development. In my mind, it's just a duplex, right? But like some of the companies out there go, we do small developments, and I'm like, it's a duplex. It's a duplex.
Yeah.
So we still do. So we still do that side of the business as well for our clients, where we help build duplexes and subdivision. So the business is kind of growing out. So hence why it's Inspired Property Group, because we've got a whole different range of things. But I think and the other thing about it is we refer to ourselves as a buyer's agency now. 2-3 years ago, no one knew what that was. So we didn't really refer to it. Now
it's really grown. It's really grown in popularity, the buyer's agent. So previously, like you said, sort of 2-3 years ago, people saw buyer's agents as almost a niche service for the wealthy.
Yes.
And it was something that, if you don't have time, usually whether they're executive level professionals, managers, people who don't have time to actually go seek for an investment property, they'll pay a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent will find the investment property, do the numbers for them and make sure it works. But I'm seeing a massive trend in that going down to first home buyers who are now looking at buyer's agents, first time investors looking at buyer's agents. Why do you think there's been that shift? Because a lot of the fees, from what I've seen, haven't actually got much cheaper from buyer's agents. So it's interesting to see there's that shift. Why do you think that is?
Look, I think one is people have is recognised the value in those services. Now, I caveat that with I've been in the industry doing this for 7 years, and there's people out there that have been doing it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever that is, right? But I think the big shift is people have seen the value in using a buyer's agent now, as opposed to, because the thing I always say to people is like, you can go, yes, bless you.
We'll edit that out.
The thing I always say to people is like, you can go and search for your own property, right? It's like you could go do a basic mechanics course and learn how to change your oil, fine, good, you could go do that. But if you want that engine stripped apart, put it around, put all back together, it's working perfectly, that's years of experience to do that. And I think that
speaks for every service, You can do your own tax return. You don't need a personal trainer. You can go to the gym yourself. You don't need a mortgage broker. You just go do your own research. I think people are starting to see the value in time and services for a lot of these different services. So buyer's agent's definitely one of them.
100%. Like, as I say to my clients, I've been doing this for 7 years. There are areas that I'm now buying in that 4 years ago I would have never have bought it, because things change, stuff changed, things shift. And so I've got that experience over 7 years of looking at it. Plus the way the market is at the moment, everything moves so quickly out there in the market. So if you're not, as I was just saying to you, we've just employed a full-time property researcher. Their job every single day is to look for opportunities on the market. Some of those opportunities might only be there for an hour, and then you've got to get in and get them because they're going that quickly at the moment. The other kind of interesting thing that's come up recently is a lot of real estate agents now have buyer's agents lists where the properties aren't making it to realestate.com. My phone buzzes every day with off-market opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, I think people get confused. People think sometimes like it's like, off-market 20% below. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It just basically
they want market value. Yeah.
It just basically means someone doesn't want to pay $4,000 to list it on realestate.com, and they'd rather go out to a buyer's agent.
But what it does mean for the customer is that if they want to do their own research, they're not going to see those properties unless it's through a buyer's agent.
100%. And then the other big thing about using the buyer's agent is We have won properties for clients where other people have put in high bids because of, one, my relationship with the real estate agent, and secondly, how I position my clients. Because at the end of the day, all the real estate agents, so a lot of people go and, you know, put in stupid under market offers, and I don't do that. I just say, I'm really straight. Like, what does your client want for the property? If it's market value and it's in line with, great, fine, because, you know, you secure the asset. But also the real estate agents want a sale. They want to know that it's going to go through, because the last thing they want is the sale falling over, because it looks bad to them. So when we come in as buyers agents, where we go, clients pre-approved, we're ready to go. They know that I know the whole system on how to buy. There's no education they're having to do with me. I've educated my client. They're more than happy to work with buyers agents because it makes the whole transaction so much smoother.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Now, you've sort of spoken about already, and anyone that sort of watched so far will be able to sort of figure out, if they don't know already, what a buyer's agent is. But maybe you can explain the buyer's agent model, because basically your real estate agents, a lot of people don't actually know what a buyer's agent is, and when it's useful and when they would use one.
Okay.
I'll start by saying this. I do know of two different models. Now, I know there's a little bit of contention between some of these models, but I do know that there's a fee for service model where you pay and they go find a property, you know, that fits their description. And then there's a commission model, which is sort of those brand new homes where they'll still sort of find a property that will fit your description, but that you don't pay for them. They get a commission from the developer or the builder. That's sort of what I understand the two models to be when it comes to sort of buyers agents.
Yeah, and the reason I hesitate is because, okay, there's, in my mind, there's two types of buyers agents out there in the world, right? There are the newer ones where it's like the client comes to them and says, so I have typical clients all the time, right? Come to me and say, I've got $800,000 budget. I want to buy a property in Sydney because my parents live in Sydney. I want to buy an investment property in Sydney. I've got $800,000 and that's what I want. And I go, okay, great. And there's your buyer's agent out there which will take that detail and go look in Sydney and find them an $800,000 property, right? Done. That's that side. Where we sit as our business is, I actually focus a lot more on education. So this particular client, I took through our initial consultation, and I talked to them about everything, got them to understand investing, numbers, cash flow. By the end of that, they were like, maybe Sydney might not be the right market for me. I'm like, yes, I don't think it is, because based on your cash flow and how much money you've got, you know, if you buy in Sydney 800, you're getting 600 a week in rent if you can buy an 800, right? And so she worked out it was going to cost her too much money. So in my mind, the really good buyers agents out there in the market spend that time educating the client so that then when I go find a property, it's the right property for the client, because a lot of people don't, and I don't want to make people see, don't really know what they want. They've got a purchase price. They've got a purchase price, and that's it.
Mate, I don't know what I want when I go to the grocery shop. So I can understand where people come and they have an idea and they speak to their uncle at the barbecue who says, you know, this is the best place to invest because they invested there, you know, 5 years ago. I always use that analogy because it's so common. You speak to family and friends and everyone's so opinionated. So they sort of come with this preconceived idea of what's a good investment, where they should go. And sometimes it's difficult to break. I guess that's your job, right? To sort of break that down and go, all right, look, that is a good idea, but maybe there's an option, you know, B, C, D that might be better for you, and giving them that education.
Yes. So we do. So this is what in my mind a good buyer's agent should do. Education up front, client understands exactly a market's kind of property that they should be looking for based on their purchase price, their cash flow. So I do a lot of work on cash flows and a lot of work on understanding markets and how they work and all that. From there, then the buyer's agent should go out to the market, and their job is to find the very best value property that you can buy. Now, when I say that, people used to think the buyer's agent's job was to negotiate the property down, right? Now,
which is part of it. Yeah.
Yes, we do negotiation, but in a hot market, you're actually looking at getting the property, not negotiating down on the property. So my job is to get the best value. So then we sit down with the client and we provide all the research, so area, location, demographics, wage growth, vacancy rates, population data, who works there, comparative sales data, comparative rental data, like everything you need to know. A lot of it, and I caveat that, a lot of the guys out there use the last 3 to 4 years worth of capital and vacancy. It all looks good. Everything looks good over that. You want to be looking long term, right? Last 15 years and seeing. So then we do that. And then once the client's happy to go ahead with the property, we do the negotiations, we secure the property, we book in the building and pests, we make sure their insurances are in place, we connect them to property managers, we help them with depreciation, we're liaising with the broker and the selling agent, we're managing time frames, we're helping secure the property, then we've secured it, and then basically every 12 months we do a property review as well. So we look at the property, how it's performing, where we're going, what's our next step, what's our next one. So that's what a good buyer's agent should do, is that full service in my mind.
You've answered one of the questions I actually did want to ask you, which was what to expect from a buyer's agent. And I can't tell you how many times a client of mine has come to me and said, "Oh, by the way, Keaton, I'm using a buyer's agent," and that's their prerogative, and that's fine. And 9 times out of 10, that's a made-up statistic, but very, very, very often, my clients will have an experience where this buyer's agent sort of says, "What do you want?" And they say, "Well, okay, I want 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms," and I'll go, "Okay, I'll find a 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms for you." And they go ahead and find 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and there's no education. They go, "Here, I've got a property for you," and I sit there and I think, did they just go on realestate.com? Like, what did they do? What service did they provide? Especially considering the fees they charge, what service have they provided my customer other than finding them a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom property? I could have done that for them for free. And so I love what you said, and I think it's so important that buyers agents give a whole service. Now, take away the property management out of that for a second, just the education piece, that cash flow forecast. And I've seen your cash flow forecast, and you've done that for one of my clients. So I have seen it.
Yes.
It's brilliant because it helps them break down how much is this property actually going to cost me on a weekly basis. And people don't actually understand that even in a positively geared type of property, after expenses and property management fees and all the different things, quite often it still might cost you $150 a week or $200 a week, to actually hold that property. And that type of education piece is so important rather than a buyer's agent. And I think that's what a lot of people are scared of when they pay, whatever price it is for a buyer's agent, that the buyer's agent's just going to go to realestate.com and find them a property that fits the description and not necessarily a good property.
So the way I always kind of use the analogy, and I love fishing, right? So I love fishing, right? There's one way to fish, which is you get your beach, you have 30 rods, you stick 30 rods out with all different baits, different lures on, and eventually at some point you are probably going to catch a fish because you've got enough out there. The other way to go fishing is, you target the type of species you want, you have the exact bait or lure, the exact spot you're going to do, and you're going to cast at that spot and you're going to get the fish right. So so taking that back to the buyers, I think there are those on the market, and I've seen them, where they just keep throwing, so 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1 car, budget 500. They just keep throwing properties in front of the client until the client goes, "Oh yeah, I like that one. I like that one," right? And then the client buys that one, right? Versus what we do, which is, to be honest with you, it takes me usually 3 to 4 weeks to find a property, and that's full-time looking with my researcher and myself. We will present literally probably 1 property to a client, because what we've done is we've gone through 500 or 600, we've culled down to about 4 or 5. Out of those 4 or 5, we've culled down again. We're literally presenting 1 property to our client, but when we give them all the research, the data, the why, the areas, the locations, how come we've got to that one, 99.9% of my clients will go ahead with that property, because it ticks all of the boxes because we've done the research to make sure that happens, versus the other way, which is just go fishing. Like I saw one the other day, this client showed me that his buyer's agent had sent through to him, and it was an old 1950s property. It needed some work being done to it, and it had a pool. And I said to the guy, I don't buy anything with a pool as an investment for my clients. Never. That I don't even look at them.
I've been there, done that too.
I don't even look at them, right? Because there's, if it's non-compliant, it can cost you 10 grand to get the thing compliant. Plus the tenants going to look after it.
The pump breaks.
So to me, straight away, like I said to the guy, I'm sorry to say, but your buyer's agent doesn't really know what he's doing if he's giving you something that's got a pool. Minus let alone properly, right? So yeah, it is a lot about that research side. So I always say, when I get a lot of referrals from my clients who refer people to me, because my clients, when they're at a barbecue, they don't go, oh, this guy showed me 5 or 6 properties, I bought one, or I went to a seminar and they told me there was 3 left, so I ran to the back of the room and bought one. Yeah. They know why. They know the location, the area, the demographics, the capital growth. They're educated. They know why they bought.
And confidence is such a big part of investing, especially if you're not a property investor and maybe it's your first time. I can even say some of my clients who are, got 5 investment properties under their belt and they want to buy their 6th one. Quite often they're still seeking expert advice because they're thinking, where am I going to get the 6th one? And the market's changed, and the areas that I did buy in aren't performing the way. And so that confidence that comes from knowing, if you can buy an investment property and say at the end of the day, I know why I bought that. I didn't buy it because it was 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and in the Gold Coast. I bought it because these are the numbers. This is what the area is looking like in the next 5 years, and I'm confident that property is going to get me a return. And I think that when you're trying to do it yourself, it's that to get to that point of confidence is a lot of hard work. And I think that's the real value in the buyer's agent model.
Yeah.
And the right buyer's agent model. And I'm not afraid to say that there's a lot of, what's the word for it? Cowboys out there in that sort of buyer's agent space that will, just chuck properties in front of my customers and convince them that's the right one.
What's worse than that? And I know there's that little, there's that graph where it's like consciously incompetent, consciously competent, right? Yeah. I'm not saying that people shouldn't choose to be a buyer's agent. Absolutely. Like, I love it as a career. I think it's an amazing career, and I love working with my clients. But if you've got someone that is unconsciously incompetent, doesn't really know what they're doing, that is more dangerous, right? Because I've seen stuff that other people have bought through buyer's agents, and they've convinced them to pay more money than they should have done. Like I always say to my clients, if we don't get it at this price, we just don't worry. There's another opportunity. We don't have to keep going up and up. And I think if they don't know what they're doing, they can put clients into areas where they shouldn't really be putting clients. Or the other thing, and I hope she doesn't ever listen to this. I won't use the name though. So I spoke with a buyer's agent the other day. She's been in the business for 3 months. Heart's in completely the right place. Great lady. But I started educating her, and she's like, "Wow, you know so much." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing this for 7 years." She goes, "So the way I was going to try and find areas for my clients was I'm going to sign up to Terry Ryder, and I'm going to look at his reports from Terry Ryder, and then I'm going to, wherever Terry Ryder suggests, I'm going to kind of take my clients there, right?" Yeah. And I'm like, yes, you and every other person that doesn't know what they're doing is going to read those reports and then go and buy in those areas, right?
Who are we paying? Who are we paying at the end of the day?
Right? So I'm like, because what I do is to be honest with you, I don't read any of those reports. I don't talk about hotspots, capital growth. These are the 5 suburbs that are going to grow by 16% in the next year, like some of the guys spoke. I don't do any of that. I just look at core fundamentals and go, that looks like a value market, like Townsville, for instance. So we were getting clients into Townsville 2 years ago before anything happened, because I looked at the market and went, properties are really cheap, cash flow is really high. Yes, it hasn't had great capital growth, but I can see waves in the market. I could see people's borrowing capacities coming down. And it was interesting because a lot of people went from like 800 to say $600,000 borrowing capacity. And then they all sat on the fence because they were like, oh, 600 doesn't really get me anything. Don't worry about it. And then once people realized that, okay, interest rates weren't going to come back down really quickly, they started jumping in. So all my clients were at that 500 to 600. I'm like, well, where's the value? Where can we go? Anyway, Townsville was one I stumbled across. I'm like, there's value here. It's in their market range. So I never talk about focusing on capital growth. Like, here's what I say to my clients. I can tick you all the boxes for capital growth, but I'm not going to promise you it because no one can promise you capital growth. We could have a World War III in 3 years' time.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad that's one of the most frustrating things when everyone says, this is, when I hear an agent say, this is guaranteed to grow, 10% in the next 12 months. And I'm just like, how? It might, and they might look. All the indicators may point to exactly that. So they're not lying through their teeth. They're coming from a place of data, and I understand when they're saying that. But I think it's a very dangerous game to start promising equity and promising 100%. Growth to new buyers when you can't guarantee that.
No, and so like Townsville, like we got clients in there purely based on cash flow. And I said, look, the cash flow is phenomenal. That those properties are going to literally pay themselves off. And I'm really upfront with, okay, look, let's say in 30 years, that property never increased in value, 1 cent, but somebody else paid the entire mortgage off for you. Are you in a better position with a fully paid off $400,000 or $500,000 property than not?
Well, it's a game of semantics at that point, because you sort of say, that hasn't given you any value in return. You go, well, that's not true, because someone's paid off your mortgage, right? And so, value in an investment property isn't always capital growth. Now, I think, you pretty much invest anywhere in Australia and there'd be some level of capital growth, But in saying that, that's not the only indicator of value of a property. And especially if you're investing for a very first time, lenders love to see money coming into the account. More than they like to see equity, if that makes sense. And so, and so if they can see that borrowing capacity for a sort of a personal investment, that's going to really help you buy your next property and give the borrowing capacity for the next property. And as that loan goes down and the rental yields increase or whatever happens to the market, then you're in a pretty good position. So that property without capital growth has actually given you a lot of value.
Well, 100%, and it's funny, right? So we're kind of out of the Townsville market now. It's kind of nearish the top. I think it's got another 6 more months to run, but I'm like, prices so I'm out. But I can guarantee you, all the new guys that might be in the market are hearing, oh, Townsville's going amazing. Let's get my clients into Townsville. I'm like, we're already in, we're gone.
Well, there's that saying that says that when in the industry that says, as soon as you know. I think it works with shareholding too. As soon as you know that there's a hot buy, or a hot spot for a property or an investment, once you hear that, it's too late. Once you've heard it, everyone else has heard it, and everyone else is investing there.
So you're really looking at that, and then you're right on the capital. Here's a really simple example I use for clients. Right, I go, let's say you bought $1 million property, and in 10 years. It went up $500,000. We're just going to use 10 years, $500,000. You made $500,000 capital, yeah? Okay, now let me tell you that property cost you $20,000 a year to hold because you bought it at $1 million and you're getting, say, $650, $700 a week in rent, which is kind of what you could get incentive, right? So it cost you $20,000. So have you actually made $500,000? No. Because it cost you $20,000. So over 10 years, it might have cost you, say, $200,000, right? Roughly. We're just going to use it. So actually, you've made $300,000, technically. Now, let me ask you this question. If you had $1 million property and it went up to $1.3 million, but it cost you nothing to hold over those 10 years, have you made exactly the same amount of money? Yeah, you have. And then you're a broker, so let me ask you this question. Is the bank more likely to lend to someone where their property is not costing them a cent to hold versus a property that's costing $20,000 a year for them to hold out of their pocket?
Oh, no brainer.
Right? So exactly. So what I focus on with my clients is get the cash flow right. Because what a lot of people do is they go, I can borrow $800,000. I want to go buy it. One of the key questions, and this is a question that every person should look at before they buy an investment property, is how much per week can I afford to put towards holding an investment property?
And that's where your cash flow comes in.
That's where the cash flow comes in, right? So you want to know that figure, right? Because to give you an idea, I had a client once, and I think they could borrow 800,000. I asked them that question, and they said, "Look, we can afford $100 per week." Okay, great. That's actually not a bad budget, right? And I said, "But we want to buy the property just down the road from us." I said, "Okay." And I said, "Give me the numbers," and it was like 850,000, and I think it was going to get like 560 a week in rent. And I did all the numbers for them. I said, "That property is going to cost you $343 per week to hold," and they're like, "Oh, we can't afford that." I'm like, "That's right. You can afford to buy it. You can't afford to hold it." And this is the problem you get in as an investor, because then you've got a property that you're trying to hold, throwing too much money in, hoping that it's going to go up in capital growth. And a lot of people end up selling them after 4 or 5 years because it hasn't done anything and it's costing them too much money. And as you know, with property markets, sometimes the property market, Sydney, before it started getting growth, was sat there for about 10, 11 years, nothing. And then in 2 years, it doubled in value.
Yeah.
So, for me, it's like, that cash flow is a real key conversation to have people to understand what it's going to go. Because what I say is cash flow is pretty predictable. Like interest rates fluctuate a bit, rents, up, generally going up at the moment. Capital growth is unpredictable. You just really don't know when it's going to come. So get the cash flow right, and the capital growth will come.
Yeah, and that's just an extra benefit if it does happen. If it explodes, as they love to say, then that's just an extra benefit. I think, like I said, a lot of people will make the mistake of just looking at interest, and then looking at interest, and then looking at how much rent's coming in, and then they'll go, okay, or they'll look at the repayments, even simpler. They'll just, what's the repayment? And how much rent's coming in? Is it covering it? Brilliant. Okay, it's not costing me anything to hold that property. That's not necessarily true. Especially with agent fees, repairs.
You got rates, you've got water, you've got insurances. Exactly.
And so over time, you are actually most people are spending money on their investment properties, even if it's $100 a week, $200 a week, $300 a week. And it's really important to understand that positively geared conversation is not just a matter of interest and rent. There's a lot that goes into that.
And that's where that education piece comes in, because I have a lot of clients that always start with, I want a property that's going to pay for itself and be positively geared. Yeah. Okay, cool. And I never disagree. And I go, let me show you numbers and let me show you the cash flow. And then they start to understand that in today's market at 7% or 6.5% for P&I. And so, if you're borrowing 100% of that property, you would literally have to have a property that's generating about an 8 to 9% return to have it actually be cash flow positive. Like actually, and you can
especially if the LVR is quite high. If it's highly leveraged property, the more leveraged it is, the more. And these days, especially for investments, people are leveraging it quite high for tax reasons and other things. So there's most likely will be a cost. If you're getting a 5% rental yield or under, there will be a cost.
100%. And then it's about figuring out and going, can I afford that? Is it comfortable for us? Have you got any, like with young couples and things, like they're both working and go, are you planning on having kids in the next couple of years? Yeah, we're planning on having kids. Okay, let's say you had half an income now. How much can you afford now? Because I don't want you having a kid worrying about that you've got to go back to work, because you've got to kind of try and pay for some investment property you bought.
Now, in saying that, there's, it's not all doom and gloom, because over 10 years, and as you hold that property for a while, and if there is capital growth, then rental yields will usually follow that capital growth in some markets. And that does become positively geared, but it's a long-term thing. This is, if you're thinking in the next 10 years, from what I've seen, it does cost to hold that investment property in sort of that short term. But as time progresses, the loan decreases. Maybe there's a few refinance and restructuring involved. You'll start to get a property, and that's where you get some of these sort of more mature, property investors who are just sitting, and the properties are just dealing with themselves, and they're getting themselves a nice positive cash flow, moving into that sort of retirement stage. So it is possible. It's not going to cost you $200 a week for the rest of your life.
No, not at all. Not at all. And look, I'm really proud to say, I think in 6 years, I know of one client that sold their investment property, and they actually sold it to their dad, right? So even when we were doing it and we were getting, 2%, 2.5%, right? and we've come up to 7, where all my clients are up at the higher interest. None of them, not one of them, have actually sold their investment property because we got the cash flow.
You found the right property.
Right. So once, as interest rates went up, those rents went up to kind of match that out, right? But also, they've all made, like, and as I said, I never promised capital growth, but I've clients have made bucket loads of capital growth just by ticking the right boxes and getting into areas. I mean, even in the buy, like I've had some clients recently who have made 50 grand from the day they purchased the property to settlement. So within 5 weeks have made 50 grand because some of the markets are running that hot at the moment.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, look, that was a big conversation about buyer's agency. It was really, really good. So I really appreciate that. I did want to ask you, with sort of what time we have left, just a few sort of common questions that I get asked usually from first-time investors. One of them was, if you're a first-time buyer, and you may have sort of answered this before, at the moment, because of interest rates being so high, because property prices are so high now, you and I are both based in Sydney, but really once you start talking about most capital cities at the moment, it's expensive.
Yes.
Should first-time buyers seek the grants and the government schemes and the stamp duty waivers and all the things that come with being a first-home buyer and try to buy their first home as an owner-occupier, or should they buy an investment first?
I love this question.
Common question. What's your thoughts?
Okay. So first off, I'll caveat with this. I don't think there's any wrong or right way to do investment. Whether you buy your own occupier up front, or like I did, I bought investments for 10 years and only in the last 4 years have I bought my first owner occupier, right? So to me, I'm like, there's no wrong or right way to do this. I think, it really comes down to the individual and having that conversation. So, and again, locations and areas and things like that. So it's kind of like talking about that cash flow component again, right? So looking at areas. So I have had first home buyers who we've helped buy in Sydney, for instance, in an area that they don't want to live in. They don't want, but what we've done is we've taken advantage of all the grants, everything that's on the table. We did the property as an investment, not as a first home buyer, but we did all the numbers. They bought the property, moved in it for 6 months, got all the grants, moved back to where they wanted to live and rented it out to the market. Great little strategy because it saved them on stamp duty. They got grants, blah, 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 blah. It's fantastic, right? Then the other way to look at it is going, okay, well, if I want to live in this particular area, and I've got a lot of clients who have it's funny, like they're renting, they've got kids, they go to a particular school, they actually can't afford to buy in that area that they want to. So instead of buying there, they go, well, let's go buy an investment property that's going to cost me hardly anything. And then that way I can build capital that way. And then maybe later on down the track, I can pull that capital out to buy in the area that
rent vesting. Robert Kiyosaki.
Right?
Yeah.
Rent vesting, right? Yeah. I did it for years, right? And the benefit of that is obviously your cash flow is not getting chewed up on a mortgage because you've got a mortgage, but someone else is paying 80 or 90% of your mortgage. So I think for me, it's kind of one of those things of looking at the pros and cons of both sides and going, what may be the better option for you? Because again, if we're talking about saving 20 grand on stamp duty and we've got $1 million, let's say we've got $1 million borrowing capacity, right? Or 800, what is the cap? 850 or something like that. Okay, you can save 25 grand on stamp duty. Okay, great. Now you can go buy a property for 850, and let's say we're looking at an investment type scenario, you're going to buy and move out of it, and you'll get 550 a week in rent. Okay, great. Yep. That property is going to cost you 15 grand a year to hold. So your 25 grand saving on stamp duty is offset by it's going to cost you 15 grand every single year to hold. So by year 2, you've lost that 25 grand anyway, right? Yep. So then you go, well, for 800, could I go buy an investment property getting me, so that's a dual occupancy, getting me $900, $950 a week in rent? Yes, you could. So that cost to hold comes down to maybe 2 or 3 grand. So you're like, so it's always looking, for me, it's always looking at the numbers. Going, how do the numbers stack up and what is the best move and best option for
I think as well, the customer, and this is something that you can't, maybe with those figures, you can help them get some clarity with it. But someone who's looking at buying their first property and they're wondering whether it's an investment or owner occupier, there's a common clash in their own brain, I guess, when they're thinking, I really want to invest and I want to, use the equity, invest again, and use this, but I also want to buy an owner occupied property to live in that's going to be my forever home and things like that. And so I think what a lot of people need to do is really get clear on their long-term goals as opposed to their short-term goals. Like, I know that living in the property is going to be great, but what most people do, especially in the Sydney market, especially first-home buyers with a small deposit, is they max out that borrowing capacity because they're really trying to reach that property they really want, in the area they really want, close to the school they really want, close to the public transport and their work. So they max out their borrowing capacity, and then they sort of come back and say, okay, well, can I get now an investment property? I want to start to invest because that was my goal. And you sort of have to turn around and go, well, you've maxed out the borrowing capacity. You might have to wait a few more years to get a bit more capital growth and, use the equity in your property. And right now you're spending a lot on your mortgage. It's a 7% interest rate or, 6.5% interest rate. And so they need to get really clear at that initial, on that outset, and think, am I just wanting to build an investment portfolio quickly and fast and sort of start that? Or deep down in my heart, do I just want to buy a home that I can settle in? And neither's a bad option. It's just something they need to get clear on. Yeah,
there's not, and this is the thing I do hate about in the market at the moment. You listen to all these guys out there, right? And they're like, no, don't buy new because that's awful. Just buy existing. And then you've got guys that go, no, don't buy existing, buy new. No, don't get an owner occupier. Buy this. I'm like, there's no wrong or right way to cut this. It's about understanding education. They're doing it. But let me give you an example, and this I think is will highlight that first home buyer versus investment, right? Let's say someone says to me, we can afford $2,000, let's say $1,000 a week, right? Like, we're saving $1,000 a week as a couple at the moment. We could go buy our first owner occupier. Yeah, you could, right? But then let me give you the numbers on a cash flow of an investment property, say it. $700,000 or something like that, right? We find a property that's only going to cost them, say, $100 per week, right? Now, what becomes really interesting, you will know this as a broker, is if you throw that extra $900 spare cash flow that you've now got into the investment property, I've shown clients and I go, you can pay that because you've got the rental income coming in. And like, you can pay that property off in 8 years. So think about this: in 8 years' time, you could have $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 worth of capital if you wanted to. Now, in 8 years, you could sell that sucker up, bring that capital back to where you're living now, and you'd probably have a
healthy deposit,
50% deposit or a 40% deposit. Yeah. I did exactly that. We did that. We built wealth. And we're looking at buying a farm potentially next year up the coast. I can put in a 60 or 70% deposit into that property.
Yeah,
I don't think I would have been in the same position if I bought my very first owner occupier, because I've been able to leverage that money and not use much of my cash flow. So I guess the answer is there's no wrong or right. It's just about sitting down, understanding the numbers, and then looking at what is the best case scenario for you and your circumstances, and then going with that.
I do also think there's a bit of like keeping up with the Joneses when it comes to buying an owner occupied property. There's maybe a little bit of a social status element to it, as opposed to, hey, I've got a cheap investment in, Townsville or something that's $400,000, as opposed to saying, hey, I've got $1 million property in, Western Sydney. I think there's a lot of people who want to escape the rental market and want to, spend a lot of money on an owner occupied property, when in fact, if they just hold out, if there's a little bit of patience, they can invest, somewhere with a buyer's agent, get some capital growth, exactly like you said, find that equity, sell that property, and then you found your way into a bigger, better home. And by that time, maybe income's increased and things like this. And I think it's important for first-home buyers to try to not squeeze into a property that they can barely afford as your first home. I think that's I think I'd probably confidently give that advice. Don't squeeze in if it's going to max out your cash flow. If it's going to cost you a lot of money, it's not worth it. And especially when a lot of first home buyers these days try to squeeze into a property, and as their family grows, they have kids and they grow, they all come back to me and say, Keaton, we're looking at changing after 5 years, not very long. We're looking at upgrading our own occupied property, but we want to keep our existing property. And one of the fundamental issues with that is usually tax related, where you're using equity from your now investment property to buy your own occupied property. So you've got this 100% leveraged own occupied property, and you've got to pay down investment property. And now your cash flow is sort of stuck at its end. And so I see that happen so often. So I'm always big advocate for patience with the own occupied purchase.
Yeah, I'm with all my own occupiers. I'm always like, this is not going to be your dream home. This is not your dream home.
Right.
This is just an opportunity for you to get a foot in the market. And if we can get in below your budget, and it might not be the ideal property, it might, like I'm getting one for a guy in WA at the moment. He's moving from Sydney over there, right? And what we're going to end up is nowhere near his ideal property. It'll be a 3-bedroom, 2 bath, 1 car. It's not going to be what he wants. It's not ideal. But he knows after we've talked that this is just his foot in the door. He gets in the door. In 5 years' time, he can sell that property. He'll make some capital on it. 5 years' time, he can sell that property. Then he can upgrade. I think the trouble you find with some of these guys, is like, they want the big with everything and blah, 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 blah. So it's like, man, you're just going to be tied to a mortgage for 30 years. Like, you're better off going less, having more cash flow. Throw that extra cash flow in the loan. Pay the loan down fast. Don't max out the stuff yet. So I'm a big advocate for that.
And do you want to buy an owner-occupied property in Sydney, or do you want to get 10 in Boston properties in 10 years? Because I've heard someone who wants to do both, and actually when I say heard someone, so many people will come to me and say, Keaton, I've got a goal for investing. I want to buy 10 investment properties in 10 years. And I go, great, where are we going to start? And they go, owner-occupied property. And you go, okay. But you know what I mean? Like, if you really want to sort of strategize and figure out how you're going to get, those 10 in Boston properties in 10 years, which I'm not even sure where that comes from. Does that come from anywhere, a book or something? I feel like a lot of people talk about 10 investment properties in 10 years. I'm not really sure where it comes from, but it's a common goal. And then they sort of come and say, well, let's start by getting an occupied property. That's not going to be my forever home. And I'm always like, well,
I don't know. I think there's this thing with investors of like, how many properties do you have, right? There's that guy that does, I bought 30 properties before 30 and now I'm up to like 89 or whatever that is, right? And I'm like, okay, like I'm like, that's fine. Like, do whatever you want to do.
Good on you.
My thing is what's the value of that property portfolio? What's the debt on that portfolio? What's the return? So I had a client came through to me the other day. He owned six investment properties. I'm like, no, invest. And I looked, they're all under $200,000, right? So nothing wrong with that, but I'm like, that's $1.2 million worth of property that he owns, right? I'm like, we could just buy a $1.2 million duplex for exactly the same amount of money, probably the same sort of rental yield. Nothing wrong with that. But I think if you get stuck on like, there's this magical number of properties that you should have, that it's not.
The more the merrier.
It's based on the value, the rental return, everything like that. My thing is I think realistically, 3 decent, fully paid off investment properties could be generating you $150,000 per year passive income. I'm like, I don't know if you need more than that.
After that, it's a hobby.
It's collecting them.
Just collecting them.
So just collecting them. So I'm like, I don't think there's any magical thing, but like I said to all my clients, start with the first one.
It's also, there's a massive, and this goes into that sort of that whole owner-occupied debate as well. There's a big lifestyle thing that you have to consider as well, and that's so individual. Like, what's your lifestyle going to be like? Constantly buying investment properties. For some people, they will love it. For some people, that's everything, and for those people, that's great because maybe it's a bit of a hobby as well. Doing the research and finding. And for other people, it's like, no, we just want a good retirement. We just want something to pass on to our kids. For other people, they're happy with an owner occupied. The investment is only, like you said, like a route to buying a forever home in 10 years time. So everyone's got these very unique scenarios, and sort of that the more the merrier, the bigger the better type of sort of property investment strategy might not necessarily suit your circumstances and what you want to do. And that's something that a buyer's agent, I assume, can help with.
Well, we don't
promotion.
We don't provide
financial advice.
No financial advice. But look, I think the numbers is the biggest eye opener for a lot of people when they see the numbers and they can see it in front of them. They go, "Oh, okay, now I understand it. Now I get it. Now it makes sense." Yeah.
Now, look, there's honestly so many questions I want to go through. I'm conscious of the time. Look, I'll give you one.
We can do a quick fire round.
Let's do that. No, I like the idea. We'll do a quick fire round. I'll give you I won't ask you about the investment strategy. I think you've answered that. The cash flow is really good. It's all about the cash flow, making sure it works well, and you're not not living off beans at the end of the day.
Yes.
Should you buy, quick fire round, should you buy new or existing?
It doesn't matter. It's based on the area and the location. What's interesting at the moment, though, is new was a lot more expensive than existing. The existing market has actually moved up quite substantially. We're actually starting to do a few more new properties for clients because literally there's not that much of a gap where there used to be. So again, based on individuals, whether or not you want to go for new or existing, I don't think there's necessarily 12 months ago, existing was about 150 grand less than new. Now it's maybe 50 grand. So it's kind of getting to the
contextual, I guess.
It's a little bit less maintenance, better depreciation. Yeah, I'm easy either way.
What should I look for in a good investment property? Again, I think you've answered that perfectly. When should you sell a property?
Never. No.
Some people say that, right? So
my thing about selling an investment property is only ever sell an investment property if you've got some sort of plan of what you're going to do with the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're in financial hardship or someone's sick or whatever you need to sell, great. That's why I love investments, because if you've got owner occupier, you don't have to go and remortgage that. You just sell an investment, right? But unless you're going to go and do something with that property, that money, an idea. So let's say you've made $200,000 capital, and because of that 200, if you release it from that property, you've got enough borrowing capacity to go buy 2 investment properties now. Great, that makes sense. But if you're just going to sell it to try and go and buy in the next hotspot area because you think you can make more money there, people do that all the time and chase around and they just
relocate properties that they're investing in.
And the other big mistake people make is they're like, they don't get the cash flow right. They've held the property for 5 or 6 years. It hasn't done anything. So they're like, I was speaking to a guy the other day that bought in this particular area, and he's like, yeah, my mate sold it because it just hadn't done anything for 5 or 6 years. I'm like, that area is starting to go off now. And I said, that's the thing. You got it. Longevity in the marketplace.
Yeah,
is the thing that helps. Okay. So there you go.
There we go. When is a good time to buy?
I love that question, and I'm going to sound.
I think I know the answer.
I'm going to sound like a sales guy. No, okay. The best time to buy is when you can afford to. That's simply the thing. Is when you've got the borrowing capacity, you've got the financial backing behind you, you've got the cash flow to be able to afford the property. That is when you should buy into the market. There's no such thing as timing the market perfectly or buying in the market perfectly or anything like that. Time in the market is the thing that really helps you. So if you can afford to get into the market, you just get into the market.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'll ask the last question in 2 parts.
Okay.
And this is sort of a leading question. So
okay, all right. I love this.
Where right now in June 2024, Simon, where is a good place to buy? And the second part of that question is that if your borrowing capacity only allows up to $400,000 for an investment, what are your options?
Okay, so where is a good place to buy? So at the moment, there are a lot of investors out there in the market, a lot. And there are a lot of buyer's agents doing the little run around trying to get their investors in, right? So for me, where is the best place to buy is somewhere that you haven't heard of yet. Mm-hmm. So because as soon as that starts going up in value, then everyone will start jumping in and it'll go, right? So I think anything that's kind of sub $500,000 or $600,000, because that's where a lot of people's borrowing capacity is kind of sat around at the moment for investment, is always going to be a good area to kind of get into, and somewhere where you've got good rental incomes as well. If you're looking at sub 400s at the moment, I am my little cat out of the bag, so I hope it doesn't kill this. So we found this little area called Port Augusta in South Australia.
I know the area, actually. Yeah.
13,000 people, 7,000 dwellings. We literally just secured a 4-bedroom renovated property, beautiful addition on an 800-meter square plot for $350,000, and it will get around $400 a week in rent. Right now,
wow, very good.
Now, you look at capital growth for that area, it's crap over the last 10 years, like 1 point something percent, right? But you look in the last 12 months has been 6%, and the last 3 months has been like 6 or 7%, something like that. I can't quite remember. And talking to all the local agents out there, they're going, we're getting a lot more interest in interstate investors in this area. And I know why, because the price point is so low and so affordable. So I think that area is going to get a little bit of a run. Like I said to my clients, it's not going to double. It's not going to go up to 7, but you might find you might make $50,000 to $100,000 in the next maybe year and a half, and then it's going to go flat again, because that's what will happen. But you've made the money, you've got the rental income,
and you've got good rental income. That's the main thing.
And you've got good rental income, right? So I think that's a good little area. And then for me, the strong regional centres. So look, the New South Wales regional centres are okay, but you're not getting as high rental yields as you would do in a Queensland regional centre. So, your Tamworth, your Tamworth, Armidale, even
like
Wagga, Gunnedah. The problem with those areas, though, is like you can buy something for $400 and you might be getting like $380 a week in rent, right? You take it to kind of some of the stronger regionals in Queensland and you're buying it, say, $400 and you're getting $450 a week in rent. Like we just did one, for instance, in Rockhampton, which is funny because 4 years ago you couldn't have paid me to have bought a property there. That's how markets change. We did a 4-bedroom home for $350,000 and it's getting $500 a week in rent. That's market rent. So those little regionals, I think, as well, they seem to be pretty.
Is there risk around sort of mining infrastructure in some of those regional centres? And
Yes.
and you've heard the horror stories from some of the regional centres in Perth or WA that had huge plummeting property prices because of mining booms and
So yeah, you want to always look at that. So go use census data. That's what I use all the time. Go to census data, have a look at, and it gives you a split of occupations in that area and a split of employers in that area, right? So you're always looking at it. So look, I don't mind, like some of those regional areas, there might be say 5 to 10% on mining, right? That's being employed. So you're like, okay, it's not in like in some of those areas where it's like 70 to 80% of people in mining, right? You also get the same thing with regional centres where they're like Parks, for instance, in New South Wales. Looks great area. It's the food bowl of New South Wales. 35 to 40% of people are employed in processing, like food processing. So you go, if they have a drought there for 2 years, that's a big one. So again, getting those cash flows right, making sure that you're not in an area that is wholly solely absolutely mining, right? And every suburb is different too. Like the ones that we were doing just recently, that suburb is professional. So that area is a regional centre. They've got the two people that are renting the property are 2 paramedics that work at the local hospital. So I'm like, okay, well, that mining goes, who cares? They're paramedics. So, knowing who your tenants are.
You need a good mix.
What's interesting is, and this is to be really careful, is I just read a real estate report yesterday, realestate.com, and it had the top yielding areas to buy in, right?
Okay.
And I looked at.
They're always sus though. They're always sus, those lists, the top yielding areas, yeah.
But the funny thing is, I looked at Queensland, it was all the mining areas, Moranbah, and then even in New South Wales, places like Broken Hill and da-da-da, and I'm like, yeah, you get phenomenal rental
12% rental yields
for a time, but you look at property prices there and it's awful. So I'm like, it's kind of like you've got to really balance out the both. You can't just go, I'll just go for high. I looked at all the high yielding ones for Queensland. I went, I wouldn't buy in any of those areas.
Yeah.
Same with New South Wales. I was almost like, I wouldn't buy in any of those areas either because it's just mining. So yeah, you do have to balance out those things. But yeah, I think those strong little regional centres will do well. Look, people keep asking about Victoria too.
Victoria's been. I'll be honest. Victoria's been quiet for about
a long time,
5 years, like at least. People just, everything's always Queensland, Perth, South Australia, Tasmania had a stint in there for a little bit.
Yeah.
and so, but I don't have a lot of people investing in Victoria.
No. I was talking to an agent down there the other day. He's like, when are people going to start buying back down here again? And I'm like, because now Brisbane's just ticked over as the second largest capital city, right, for median house price. And the problem you have with Victoria is the yields just aren't there. So like as an investor, you're buying for two things. One is either yield or one is capital growth, right? So Queensland, there wasn't very much capital growth in Queensland, right? It was pretty flat, but you had good yields. So people were like, I'll offset the capital because I can buy a $500,000 property getting $550 to $600 a week in rent. Great, I'm happy with that because it's covering the mortgage. Yeah. The problem Melbourne's got is it's like you can buy it $600 and he's still getting $500, $380, depending on where Werribee, Windabat. You're getting like $470 a week in rent. So you go, well, it's getting no capital growth and the rents are really low. What's my motivator? You know, now will it have its time? Yes, it will have its time. Where will it have its time at? I think again, it'll be those strong regionals. So as much as I hate Melton and I've not done anything in Melton because it got over, maybe that will have a bit of a run if it's at a lower purchase price, and then it will feed into the middle. I just don't know when. Like, to be honest with you, I started looking there the other day. We found a block of units which I found really interesting, and they were like 600, getting 850 a week in rent.
I do get a lot of customers who inquired in Melbourne, and it all seems to be units. Sort of that house and land doesn't seem to be a lot of interest to a lot of people. I don't know the market down there too well, but that's something that I've sort of observed.
It's just too expensive. Like your cheapest house and land are around like Werribee, Wyndham Vale, those areas. You're still paying like $650, $670s, and you're getting maybe $520s, $530s a week in rent, and you're like, what? Why? The question is always, why would I buy there? Some of the regionals are doing. So I'll give the listeners another little tip as well. Mildura is a strong regional centre. Its vacancy rate has been below 3% since forever. And it's actually getting some decent capital growth through that area as well. Yeah. And so again, I'm not put off by Melbourne or Victoria because of that stupid land tax thing, right? It's $1,600 a year or $17, depending on what price point you're buying property. Once you put it into a cash flow, it's just part of doing business. Yeah. It's just about, can I get a decent enough rental yield to offset the cost to actually buy that?
Yeah. No, well, look, I love the insight. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast again and going through a few things. Hopefully there's some you get some good sort of sound bites out of it. So that's good. We love a good podcast for that. But anyone who's interested in looking at buying an investment property, hopefully you've learned a bit from this podcast, and you give Simon a buzz. Inspired Property Group might be able to help you out and help you find that property that you're looking for and go through that cash flow. So I appreciate it.